Same exact location, same exact time. What went wrong? Next on Milky Way Wednesday. It's Wednesday. It's time for Milky Way. Hey guys, welcome back to Milky Way Moment of Envy. Milky Way Wednesday. Welcome back to Milky Way Wednesday. I'm Aaron King with Photog Adventures, and today we are going to talk about something that is going to shame me. Look at you, Aaron. You stink. Now, we all do what I've done here, and to put into perspective so that it's not too much of a beat up of Aaron King moment, this is a shot that I captured for the one purpose only of time lapse. Check it out. As you can see, this is Cape Kiwanda Point, and out there is Chief Kiwanda Rock, and we are featuring that. That is my main goal. That is everything that I was doing. I set up my camera. We had 13 minutes left before the Milky Way core was going to fully set below, and we were off to get some food. And so as we're all sitting there on a listener adventure out on the Oregon coast at Pacific City, looking out over Cape Kiwanda and this specifically, this sea stack of Chief Kiwanda Rock, I wanted you to see that Milky Way pass by it and go down. And as soon as it became time for full darkness, I wanted my time lapse running already. So there were certain elements and focuses that I had that didn't allow me to do what we're going to talk about today. Avoiding forgotten edges. So, first off, let's take a look at the two comparisons. MaryBeth Kiczenski's awesome image here on the left, and my frame from a time-lapse image on the right. And comparing these things side by side, what stands out as stronger and weaker? Well, let's talk about it. First off, the composition of hers being tighter, you can see how she's cropped in here and here, where that is roughly somewhere around here. And then the way that the bottom of these rocks look down here, it's probably somewhere around there. So her framing is tighter. So her Chief Kiwanda rock shape looks like this. If I were to take that and copy that and paste it, let's paste it into frame. How big does it look compared to my Chief Kiwanda rock? Yeah, obviously, it stands out immediately as being far more featured. So, how did she make this decision? She knew she was featuring the rock and a Milky Way, and that rock was a very valuable, important point of her foreground, and so she made sure that she didn't make it too small. One big difference between her shot and mine is that she captured hers with a 24 millimeter and I captured mine at 16. So I was wide out at 16. And why did I do that compared to hers? Again, the time lapse. She is capturing a single image that she is bringing together, and it's actually not a single image. That's one of the reasons why this looks so good, is because of what she did with the sky and the foreground image. In mine, single frame, and you and I have done this. You've gone out to get a Milky Way shot, and you've captured as much of the Milky Way as you can. I love seeing all of this out here. Love seeing all of that out there. But, cropping off the Milky Way at just about this point was a pretty good decision by MaryBeth. And why did she make that decision? Because she didn't forget her edges. And what are the edges of my frame? Let's use gray and talk about the edges of my frame. all of these rock features, and I'm separating out this one from this one because there's black, dark rocks while the side of this wall is being lit by the city and getting green coloring, yellow coloring. Oh, I just hated it. What MaryBeth did to get hers to look a lot more comfortable, really, really well done, because it would take a lot of work to bring those colors back and forth and just make a compromised better view. I mean, she even has some nice red in here at this section where mine is completely green, fluorescent, and looks like someone's holding over like a restroom at a truck stop light on the rocks. It does not look good at all. And so when we look at my forgotten edges versus her featured edges, that brings me to the first tip of how to avoid forgotten edges. Take a long exposure shot and see what your frame has in it. If you do a long exposure test, you can see from top to bottom, right to left, what is in your frame. What is up in this corner? What's up in that corner? What's down in this corner? What's over in that corner? What is down below? What is up above? Capture it. See everything. And then, once you're seeing everything, you have to ask yourself this one question. Content or context? Content or context? Content or context? Is what you have in the foreground from edge to edge content or context? What element of your foreground and side ground, mid ground is just context? And what does that even mean? Let me break it down for you this way by using an example that I use many, many times, the silo image. I know I use this image example a lot, but I like showing you guys images that are so simple and something that I did in my first year of doing it that every single one of you could recreate this image and do better. So first, looking at this, let's draw with orange where the content is. So Milky Way Core. Content, absolutely content. And then this large silo, this guy is content. Why is it content versus context? What in here is context then? This is context. Our terrain that surrounds, that's behind, that is the base, the anchor, the home of where that silo is coming out of. I'm allowing viewers to see specifically, okay, that silo, is that just, imagine if I cropped it right here. You look at this image and go, is that silo next to another building? Is it in the middle of a city? Is it in a small rural area? Is it in the middle of a field, abandoned? It looks kind of run down. Well, without having that context of the base ground level, you wouldn't really know what the story is of where this silo. Now, with the fact that there's nothing here and nothing over here other than the Milky Way, you know that the silo is alone, isolated, abandoned, in a rural area, just weeds growing around it. And so this weed base level is just context, and that's why I can get away with cropping it down to this far of the image. It's this little teeny part of my image composition because I just needed to keep it from being too crowded. I just, not enough space to feel comfortable. You know what it is, you recognize it, and you know that that's where the silo is resting. You see it right in there. That's the context of that foreground. So what's the difference? Content, Milky Way. I've exposed for the Milky Way. I've adjusted my settings on my camera to make the Milky Way look good. But I've also adjusted my settings to make the silo look good. I've taken a low-level light and gone out to the side of the road, placed it on a tripod, and I shone that light up on the silo and made it a feature element in my composition. It's content. I want it to look good. I want it to look sharp. In 2016, I made this a little bit too much of a distorted, tilting silo, but, I featured it. And so when you think about what's in your frame from the edges and the bottom and the top, what stuff is content and what stuff's context, you're going to decide how to expose for it. If it's content and important, you're going to expose for it. So in my lower part here where you see all these weeds, I didn't care about how exposed it was for that. They didn't have to show up clearly. They just needed to be obvious what they are. And that was it. That was it. The other example I can show you guys is right here behind this image. This is an example where the content included this canyon in Canyonlands as well as this viewpoint from Island in the Sky. All of that was content plus the content of the Milky Way going up here in the panorama. So I exposed a panorama for the sky and captured it as best as I could, and then I had to change my settings to expose for the foreground because it was just as important content as was my sky. Imagine if I captured this and this was all underexposed and you can't see it. This image would be a million times worse. In fact, that's precisely the difference between mine and MaryBeth's shot. When you look at the comparison of the foreground here versus the foreground of mine, you can see that she's featuring it and she's adjusted in some way. In what way is that? Well, I wrote an email to MaryBeth and I asked her what her settings were and how she treated it. And this is what she said. She captured the sky with her 24mm lens and did ISO 4000 f2.8 10 seconds. My shot is a Tamron lens at 16mm f2.8 as well, but then I'm all the way up at ISO 8000 and I'm shooting for 13 seconds. So we're pretty similar with mine being a lot higher ISO. Well, she says she took 10-second images, 6 of them, and stacked them in Sequator. And knowing that she stacked this sky, that is what brings out the color so much more than in mine. Mine's almost washed away compared to hers. Plus, just the nice texture of her sky, the detail in the Milky Way is just as smooth and buttery from that, extra work of stacking versus mine is single image, not bad. It's just a single image and a little bit more faded looking just because I don't have all the stuff stacked on top of each other. Well, capturing the sky that way, she went and changed completely for the ground. It's a single image, ISO 64, f-stop is at 4.5. She stopped down. And in that single image, you can see the detail of the light that's in the rocks. There's not a lot to zero noise in the rocks. And she has a really great looking reflection puddle here that helps fantastically. So let's go to our points. Content or context? Content or context? What have you declared important in your image? After your long exposure test, you've seen something interesting, and now you thought, oh boy, I need to feature that as content and not context. So then what you need to do is expose well, or just correctly, in order to let your viewer see what you're treating as content. If you expose for it well, it might require a stack. It might require a long exposure shutter. It might require a complete change in ISO and change of f-stop and make everything great and look awesome to feature it. And on top of that, because you're going to expose your foreground differently than your sky, you're going to have to use Photoshop to combine these layers. So those of you who are avoiding using Photoshop, you're not going to be able to in this situation. You're gonna have to get out of Lightroom and change settings and match these things up and make them look awesome. So there's extra work for sure when you have all the stuff to your edges that are gonna look good, and if they require an actual exposure change in your capture. So we looked at this and we know that we have content versus context. Have I exposed well or correctly for my rocks? No. Mine is the underexposed, and hers is correctly. So hers, she features, she makes them look nice. Even that light that's coming off of Pacific City looked okay on her shot, while on mine looks terrible just because of a different exposure. The way that mine at ISO 84 or 8000 brings out that color and light, it looked completely different than her soft, just nice exposure at ISO 64. It's not amplifying the light as much, and she had a good exposure on the rocks. Well, then the other thing is, well, what else did she do? What else makes it look really nice? We need to still have balance in our composition. And when you try and feature more of the content of the foreground, you need a balance there as well. And right away, we notice the triangle of this area of puddle that you can see the scum of the water, the detail of it is showing through, the highlights of the water reflecting light, and the dark, low light of the actual dark contrasty rocks against that. And then you have highlights on the rocks versus the shadow side. So this shadow side right here versus the highlight side right there, that's interest already. But the key element, the key thing that I love just about this is how this line right here takes us straight up to Chief Kiowanda Rock and then right up into the Milky Way. You get a leading line that takes you from the lower part up, thanks to the sharp contrast of this section right here. Over here, highlights, over here, contrast, dark. And that brings in a nice balance here of this image on what's splitting the middle and going up and then going into what makes the Milky Way. Just awesome. Really, really love that balance that's happening here. Almost center weighted with Chief Kiowanda Rock, and then just the nice organic shape that's breaking the plane going up here and going up and across. In my image, do I break the plane that much? No, my focus is the Milky Way movement. I want to see the stars come across the sky. And so in my thirds, I'm featuring the Milky Way entirely. So this organic shape that goes down like this, while it does break one plane, right here, it doesn't continue on for more interest and more quality. It's just context of where I'm at, with the feature being the Milky Way itself. So balance. You still have to balance, obviously, your composition. And so you need to consider what's happening on your forgotten edges and how they're breaking or helping your balanced composition. And if you need to, adjust accordingly. Move and crop in differently. Do whatever you need to make that work well. So, looking at MaryBeth's image compared to mine, let's look at hers right here. I just love how it looks and the color of the sky and the making the most of that poor light pollution that's happening and turning these rocks into a great view. The rocks become such good content as they look smooth and great, and it makes me feel like, oh, if only I had captured for that. Well, in reality, I did. Check out this image. I captured a long exposure before I did my time lapse and realized I liked the rocks down there, but I should get a better viewing of the rocks. So then I tilted my camera and went down to this angle and captured the rocks as well. Now, combining all of this, working on trying to make the sky and the ground look good together, I'll blip this shot up here. I'm not liking it. Wipe it out. I didn't like the image in the end, but I was at least aware that I needed to see what's in my frame and capture what most of you call bracketing with landscape photography. In Milky Way photography, you're not necessarily bracketing as much as you are exposing two different exposures. You're blending the sky with the ground. A lot of people, Royce Bear, Wayne Pinkston, these guys who I revere and respect with awesome Milky Way photography, they blend their sky and their ground and they compose their image and post-process their image with both of those approached differently. I have their sky separated from their ground, and they do all their post-processing work on their ground, make the ground look great, and then make their sky look awesome. Even if they didn't even blend two different time periods, they still will take their sky and separate it from the ground and post-process it differently, just to make sure that their forgotten edges are not forgotten, but treated with the same love and tender care that we treat the Milky Way core. So remember that next time you go out. Think about it. What's over there? What's over here? Take a long exposure test to see which in my frame is content and which items in my frame are context only. Things that are context, don't post-process them very heavily. Don't expose for them. Who cares? Just make sure they exist. If they're content, though, make sure you expose well, balance that composition, baby, and make it look awesome. So yeah, MaryBeth, I'm envious of your image. And speaking of envy, as always, Milky Way Moment of Envy is brought to you by MilkyWayPhotographers.com. Here on this site is where we find awesome Milky Way photographers and show off their work. You go into photos and you can see dozens and dozens of galleries of people who love Milky Way photography as much as you do and shared their work, whether they're brand new at it or completely expert. And someone who's a bit of an expert is Ralph Rohner. And I'm very envious of a shot that he has. You can follow Ralph over on Instagram at SkyPointer2000. So go to Instagram, follow SkyPointer2000. What's cool about Ralph is that he's actually a pilot and a Milky Way photographer. And so he's actually gotten some really, really, really cool stuff from the air. And he wrote an article on MilkyWayPhotographers.com actually and added his tips for capturing Milky Ways from 37,000 feet. Here's a shot of his, and here's another one. I think he actually got lucky and could capture it from the cockpit. But even if you don't have the cockpit to use and you have to capture from your window, he's got some great tips for you, so check out his work there. But for now, let's get envious together and look at this image. Wow. I just love, and I'm crazy biased towards panoramas. Love the shape of the full arch of the Milky Way. I am so sad after June when I can't capture this, when I can no longer get out and see a panorama. And so now we're going in November, and it's going to be December and January and then February. Finally, you can do a Milky Way panorama again in February. So this will come back again, just a few months of waiting, and we're there. So let's talk about what makes this image so great. Ralph has gone into Sunset Point here in Bryce Canyon, and you'll recognize Thor's hammer, I think it's called. And then over here was the Sentinel that long has since crashed. It used to be taller, and then ice broke, and last year or 2 years ago it went down. And so this view from Sunset Point has that wide angle benefit distortion that's bringing the hula hoop of the Milky Way into a nice curving shape, and then he mirrors it with this flowing pathway underneath that goes underneath and goes continuing on into Wall Street or Market Street or whatever they call that hiking path down there. I love how he's lined up this shot. I love automatically the mirroring of this shape with this shape. That's just really fantastic play with everything. But his lighting on everything, I don't know what lights, because you can see right here he has a hot spot and a little hotter there, and it's even shining on these. So I'm thinking that he left a light up above and then fired it over, and then the fill of all of that has given him enough view on these shadowy parts right here and right up front. And you can see this detail even though the light's not pointed directly at that. And the light or two, because I think he might have a secondary light that's hitting this face over here, something that's just on the pathway right there. And so he's lighting up the pathway there and hitting this facade, and a little bit of light there, plus what's going over this direction. So I think there's two lights at play here, and he's bringing it together to really light up this so orangish red, cool rock, and those contrasting with the really cool, brilliant air glow that it's coming off like aurora, the way it's so prominent and strong. The green of this air glow is so great in contrast to the bluer purple of the other parts of the sky. Just love it. Don't let Roger Clark see this, but man, oh, it's so brilliantly cool and great looking. And I believe he has a modified camera, and so a lot of his nebula show up a lot stronger up here in the Milky Way. You can really pull out some of the colorful pinks and reds that are coming out in his core. And then his core is just burning like a bush of bright light, orangish red. And then he has a little bit of a brilliant looking row of Fuki right here. It's just a nice little accent exclamation mark at the end of his Milky Way. It's like he's written a sentence that goes like this and then has an exclamation mark right here. It says, ta-da! Awesome Milky Way. So dang it, Ralph, what a great shot, man. I have not captured something this great at Bryce Canyon yet because it's tough to get into Bryce Canyon and see the feature of the rock and then see the Milky Way because you go down so much that you block off a lot of the Milky Way core. So this is a great compromise, just barely being on the path. You can walk down from the parking lot very quickly to this spot and capture the same image, and it's just really fantastic shot. When we go to Bryce Canyon, we go just outside of Bryce Canyon out at Fairyland Point, and we capture good stuff there, but panorama-wise, this is the best thing. I can't wait to capture one just like this, Ralph. Well done, Ralph. Love this shot. Again, follow Ralph over on his Instagram at SkyPointer2000. So click on that and follow Ralph. Awesome, man. So excited to see another great image that makes me envious, makes me kind of long for the spring and summer again, even though we're just barely beginning fall and winter. But, you know, okay, I can get through this. I can enjoy October, November, December, January, February until I can see the Milky Way in its nice, awesome glory again. Get out there, guys. October, yes, it's possible that your best view of the core is going to have the moon with you right now, wherever you are. But then get out in November. It's your last chance of seeing the core before 2019 is over. So please enjoy. And also, guys, the last thing I want to tell you before I go is this mailbox of Milky Way Wednesday at gmail.com is awfully lonely. I haven't had a new email since September, and I'd love to answer your guys' questions. Anything that you have that you want me to address here on the program, hit me up there. I'll answer the question, read your point, and even in Mike Maxwell's case, show off some really cool work that you have. So hit me up at Milky Way Wednesday at gmail.com if you have any questions, and help me have this segment. This segment is kind of gone until I actually have an email that comes in. So thanks guys for watching. Thanks for joining me tonight on Milky Way Wednesday. I'm Aaron King with Photog Adventures. Join me in Mars in 2030. I love this shirt. It's a new one. I haven't shown you guys it yet, but it's Mars 2030. I'm excited to get out to Mars someday. I think like Elon Musk, I'd like to die in Mars, or at least in orbit, and that's where I like to, end my life. Not like he says, not in impact against Mars, but just at old age. Fantastic. Okay, like I was saying, thanks for watching. See you guys later. Have a good one, and see you next Wednesday. Please, if you enjoyed this channel, if you're a Milky Way photographer out there, click subscribe and like, and if you want to capture all these live streams that we do every Wednesday, it's Milky Way Wednesday, 7 p.m. I'm live right here in the studio talking Milky Way. If you want to capture that and join me live, make sure you hit the bell button so that you can be notified and be there and not miss anything from Photog Adventures. Cloud cover here is pretty solid, so hopefully the 2.5 hour drive is going to be worth it. We made it here. Let's find our spot. This is called Swinging Bridge South Campground. It does suck that I can't do more of these in the daytime,